The 58-year-old widow lived a quiet life on the outskirts of Alder Creek with only her aging shepherd mix, Ranger, for company. But Eve's orderly existence was about to unravel in ways she couldn't imagine. Her days had a predictable rhythm, volunteering at the hospital, tending her garden, and trying not to think about her daughter Tara, who'd left town a decade ago after a bitter argument neither of them knew how to resolve. For 14 consecutive nights, Ranger had positioned himself at Eve's back door at sunset, his nose pressed against the glass, ears forward, tail completely still. "What is it, boy?" she asked. But Ranger didn't acknowledge her words. His focus never wavered from the same spot, a line of dense trees beyond Eve's property where an abandoned forest ranger cabin sat alongside a creek bed that had been dry for years. On this 14th evening, Eve stood behind him, a coffee mug warming her palms as rain began to patter against the roof. He wouldn't respond to treats, toys, or commands during these vigils. His behavior was unlike anything Eve had seen in their 8 years together. Just stared, unblinking at the tray line as though waiting for something only he could sense. Eve sighed and turned back to her kitchen. The modest house had belonged to her parents, left to her when they passed within months of each other 15 years ago. It sat on 3 acres of land that backed up to county forest property. The isolation had suited Eve after her husband Michael's death from cancer 5 years earlier. After losing her daughter to estrangement and her husband to illness, solitude had felt like a refuge, not a punishment. The lights flickered as thunder rumbled overhead. The power failed, plunging the room into darkness. Eve glanced at the weather alert on her phone. Severe thunderstorm warning, possible flash flooding in low-lying areas. A sharp crack of lightning illuminated the kitchen, followed immediately by a deafening thunderclap that made the windows rattle. She thought of the dry creek bed beyond her property and wondered if tonight it might finally see water again. When the emergency generator kicked in 30 seconds later, Eve turned to check on Ranger. The dog had finally moved from his sentinel position, but not to seek comfort as most would during a storm. It was a look that said, "Now, not later." "Okay," Eve whispered. Instead, he was pacing frantically between Eve and the door, emitting a single low whine before pressing his paw against the glass. Rain pelted Eve's face as she followed Ranger's dark shape through her backyard. Then he looked directly at Eve with an expression she hadn't seen since her army days, when service dogs would alert medics to wounded soldiers hiding in difficult terrain. But something in Ranger's urgency propelled her forward. She grabbed her waterproof jacket from the hook by the door, pulled on rubber boots, and took a powerful flashlight from the emergency drawer. "This better be important," she called out. As she opened the door, Ranger bolted into the downpour, pausing only briefly to ensure she was following before continuing toward the tray line. The abandoned Ranger cabin appeared in her flashlight beam, its weathered exterior glistening with rain. The wind whipped her silver-streaked hair across her eyes, and each step in the muddy ground threatened to pull off her boots. Built in the 1950s as a forestry outpost, it had been decommissioned 20 years ago when budget cuts forced the county to consolidate operations. Eve had explored it once, shortly after moving back to her childhood home, finding nothing but mouse droppings and broken furniture. Ranger didn't hesitate at the cabin's entrance. He circled to a side window, barking once before returning to the front door, which was secured with a rusty padlock. Eve directed her flashlight at the lock. "Been opened recently," she muttered, noticing scrapes in the rust. The smell hit her first, musty wood and rodent nests, but also something else. Something human. The beam of her flashlight revealed footprints in the dust, small and recent. Ranger moved purposefully through the single room to what had once been a pantry. He stopped, nose to the floorboards, scratched once, then looked up at Eve expectantly. "What is it, boy?" Eve knelt beside him. running her hand over the wooden floor. One board shifted slightly under her touch. She worked her fingers into the gap and lifted a crawl space, dark and seemingly empty until her flashlight beam caught movement. Eve's breath caught in her throat as a small face appeared in the light, blinking up at her with wide, frightened eyes. A child, a little girl no more than 6 years old, huddled in the space beneath the floor, clutching a metal lunchbox to her chest like a shield. For a moment, neither moved. Eve's medical training kicked in automatically as she assessed the child. No visible injuries, alert, responsive to light and sound, but clearly terrified and possibly hypothermic, given the dampness of the space. "Hello there," Eve said softly, using the gentle voice she'd developed over years of treating scared soldiers. "I'm Eve. That's my dog, Ranger. He's the one who found you." The girl's eyes darted between Eve and Ranger, her knuckles white against the lunchbox. "Are you hurt?" When the girl shook her head slightly, Eve continued, "It's storming pretty bad out there. Would you like to come to my house where it's warm and dry?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "Mama said wait for the dog." "Your mama told you to wait for a dog?" "A big dog with the lady. She showed me your picture." She pointed at Ranger. "Like him." "My picture?" Eve's mind raced. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Mara," the girl whispered. "Are you Grandma Eve?" The question hit Eve like a physical blow. Grandma? She had no grandchildren, or none she'd been told about. Which meant, "Mara," Eve said. "What's your mama's name?" Instead of answering, Mara turned the lunchbox in her hands and pointed to a photograph taped to its lid. Though creased and water-spotted, the face was unmistakable. Tara, Eve's daughter. Older than when Eve had last seen her, with new lines around her eyes. But undeniably Tara. "Can you come out of there?" Eve extended her hand, keeping her voice steady. "It's not safe here during a storm." Mara nodded slowly and reached up. Eve helped her climb out of the crawl space, noting how light she was, how her clothes, though clean, hung loosely on her small frame. "How long have you been here, Mara?" "3 sleeps," the girl answered. "Mama said stay quiet until the dog came. She said Grandma Eve would help me." 3 days? This child, her granddaughter, had been hiding in a crawl space for 3 days. Eve swallowed hard against the rage and grief threatening to overwhelm her professional demeanor. "You did exactly right," Eve assured her. "And now we're going to go to my house, get you warm and fed. Does that sound okay?" Mara nodded again, her eyes never leaving Ranger, who had positioned himself protectively beside her. Eve removed her rain jacket and wrapped it around Mara's shoulders. "Can you walk, or would you like me to carry you?" "I can walk," Mara said. "I'm 6. Eve felt a smile tug at her lips. 6 is very grown up. "Let's go then, before the storm gets worse." By the time they reached Eve's back door, Mara was shivering violently despite the jacket. The journey back to the house was slow, Eve keeping Mara close under one arm, while Ranger led the way, occasionally looking back as if to verify they were still following. Inside, Eve's emergency training took over. She settled Mara on the couch with warm blankets while she heated milk for Coco, all the while watching the girl with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. "Are you hungry?" Eve asked, bringing over the cocoa and some crackers with peanut butter. Simple food that wouldn't overwhelm a potentially malnourished stomach. Mara nodded, accepting the mug with both hands. "Thank you," she said quietly. As the girl ate, Eve took the opportunity to examine the lunchbox. Besides Tara's photo, there was a folded note tucked inside a plastic bag. Eve's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Mom, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Keep Mara safe. The cabin is where they won't look first. I'll come when I can. If I don't, she's yours to protect now. I'm sorry for everything." Eve read the note 3 times, searching for more information, more explanation, but found none. She looked up to find Mara watching her intently. "Mara, when did you last see your mama?" The girl's lower lip trembled slightly. 3 nights ago, she tucked me in at our apartment, then woke me up really late. She was crying. She said we had to go somewhere safe, but she had to do something first. Mara's fingers traced the edge of the blanket. She took me to the cabin and showed me the hiding place. She said, "You would come with your dog if what, sweetheart? If she couldn't come back." A tear slid down Mara's cheek. "Is Mama coming back?" Eve moved to sit beside Mara. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. For now, you're safe here with me and Ranger." Mara leaned into Eve's side, exhaustion evident in her drooping eyelids. "Mama said you were a doctor for soldiers, that you knew how to help people who were scared." "That's right. I was an army medic for 20 years. Are you scared now?" Mara asked, her voice small. "A little, but being scared is okay when something important is happening. It helps us stay alert." Mara nodded. "That's what Mama says too." As the storm continued to rage outside, Eve made a decision. She reached for her phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the sheriff's department. "This is Evelyn Mercer," she said when the dispatcher answered. "I need to report a missing person and—" She glanced at Mara, now dozing against her side. "And I found a child who needs assistance, my granddaughter." Within 40 minutes, a county social worker and Deputy Carla Boone had arrived at Eve's house. The social worker, a brisk woman named Miss Jenkins, immediately began questioning Eve, while Deputy Boone, a younger woman with watchful eyes, observed from the doorway. "You claim this child is your granddaughter, but you have no documentation to support this," Miss Jenkins asked, her pen poised over a form. "I didn't know she existed until tonight," Eve explained. "But yes, she's my granddaughter. She has a photograph of my daughter and a note in my daughter's handwriting, which we'll need to verify," Deputy Boone interjected. "Mrs. Mercer, when was the last time you had contact with your daughter?" "Almost 10 years ago," Eve admitted. "We had a disagreement. She left town." "A disagreement," Miss Jenkins repeated. "And now suddenly her child appears at your home." "Not at my home," Eve corrected. "In an abandoned cabin on county property adjacent to my land. My dog alerted me to her presence." Deputy Boone looked at Ranger. "Your dog led you to a child hiding in a cabin during a thunderstorm." Deputy Boone read it, her expression thoughtful. "This suggests your daughter believed Mara was in danger." "Did she specify from what or whom?" "No, but Mara said Tara was upset, crying, when she brought her to the cabin 3 nights ago. So we have a missing woman and a child abandoned in a condemned structure," Miss Jenkins summarized. "Under normal circumstances, the child would be placed in emergency foster care while we investigate." Eve provided what little information she had. Tara would be 32 now. Last she knew, her daughter had been working as a paralegal and taking night classes, hoping to eventually become an attorney. The line went dead before Eve could respond. She stared at the phone, adrenaline surging through her body. She immediately called Deputy Boone's direct line. "I just received a threatening call," Eve reported when the deputy answered. "Someone knows Mara is here." "What exactly did they say?" Boone asked, her voice sharpening. Eve repeated the threat verbatim. "That implies they've already buried someone else," Boone noted. "Possibly your daughter? I'm sending a patrol car to your location now. Don't open the door for anyone except uniformed officers. I'll be there in 20 minutes to trace the call." Eve thanked her and hung up, then moved to check all the doors and windows. Ranger followed her, his normally relaxed demeanor replaced with vigilant alertness. When she returned to the living room, Mara was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. "Are the police people gone?" she asked. "For now," Eve said. "One is coming back to help us." Mara nodded. "Mama said not to talk to the police, except the lady with the star on her collar." "A star on her collar? Do you mean Deputy Boone?" "She wears a sheriff's department badge." "I think so," Mara said. Mama showed me a picture on her phone. She said that the police lady would help us if something happened. This revelation startled Eve. Tara had specifically identified Deputy Boone as trustworthy. How would she know which deputies to trust or not trust? Mara, did your mama tell you why some police might not help you? She said some people do bad things even if they wear badges, but the lady with the star was good. Eve absorbed this information with growing unease. If Tara had warned her daughter about corrupt law enforcement, the situation was potentially more dangerous than she'd initially believed. When Deputy Boone arrived 15 minutes later, Eve observed her more carefully. There was indeed a small silver star pinned to her uniform collar, not her badge, but a commendation pin of some kind. The call came from a burner phone, Boone reported after checking the number. Untraceable, but it confirms our suspicion that your daughter's disappearance isn't voluntary. Duty, Eve said. Mara mentioned that her mother specifically told her to trust a police officer with a star on her collar. You have such a pin. It's a 5-year service commendation. Her eyes narrowed. Your daughter identified me specifically. According to Mara, yes, showed her your picture. I don't recall having any significant interaction with your daughter, Mrs. Mercer. But if she singled me out as trustworthy, Eve sat beside the bed until Mara's breathing deepened into sleep, trying to reconcile this image of herself, a finder of lost things, a healer, with the bitter words she and Tara had exchanged a decade ago. What has changed? And more importantly, what trouble had Tara found that made her send her daughter to the mother she'd once rejected? As morning broke, Eve's phone rang again. This time, it was Deputy Boone. Mrs. Mercer, we've found something. Tara's friend Amanda received a video from her 3 days ago, right before Mara says she was brought to the cabin. Then nothing. No calls, no texts. The timing matches. What's in the video? I don't know yet. Amanda's bringing her phone to the station this morning. But there's more. We've identified an apartment in Millston, the next town over. Rented under the name Tara Brooks. Was that your daughter's married name? No, Eve said. She wasn't married, to my knowledge. Could be an alias then. We're getting a warrant to search the apartment now. Would you be willing to come in later today to view the video and possibly identify items from the apartment? Yes, of course. I'll need to bring Mara, though. Understood. Come around noon. Deputy Boone hesitated, then added, Mrs. Mercer, prepare yourself. Given the threatening call and the circumstances of Mara's placement at the cabin, this doesn't look good for your daughter. I know, she said simply, and ended the call. When she turned around, Mara was standing in the hallway, Ranger at her side. The girl's expression was solemn beyond her years. Are they going to find my mama? They're looking very hard. Today we're going to help them. Mama said if she didn't come back, it's because she had to make sure the bad people couldn't find us. What bad people, Mara? Eve asked. Did your mama tell you who might want to hurt you? The people in the big car, Mara said. The ones who hurt the man on the road. At the sheriff's department, Eve sat with Mara in a small conference room, trying to project calm confidence while her mind raced. Deputy Boone entered carrying a tablet. Amanda sent me the video file, she explained. It's brief and the quality isn't great. Appears to have been shot at night from behind some kind of cover. Eve nodded. Mara, would you like to draw while I look at this? Deputy Boone probably has some paper and crayons. Boone produced a small activity book and colored pencils from her bag. My nieces, she explained with a slight smile. Always keep them handy. Once Mara was settled at the far end of the table, Boone played the video. The footage was shaky, clearly shot on a phone by someone trying to remain hidden. It showed a rural road curve, Millstone Bend, according to Boone, illuminated only by moonlight and distant headlights. As the headlights drew closer, the camera zoomed in shakily on an SUV approaching a pedestrian walking along the roadside. Instead of slowing, the SUV appeared to swerve toward the pedestrian. The impact was partially obscured by foliage, but unmistakable. The vehicle briefly slowed, then accelerated away. "She got the license plate," Boone pointed out, freezing the frame on a surprisingly clear image of the SUV's rear plate. A small decal was visible in the corner of the rear window, some kind of charity or event sticker. Eve stared at the image, her medical training automatically cataloging the likely injuries such an impact would cause. The pedestrian, pronounced dead at the scene, when a passing motorist found him an hour later, Boone said. Hit and run. The victim was Marcus Chen, an environmental consultant working on the watershed impact study for the new Dale Development Project. Dale? The name was familiar to Eve. Graham Dale, the developer? Boone nodded. And here's where it gets complicated. The license plate belongs to an SUV registered to Allison Dale, Graham's wife. Have you brought her in for questioning? That's the thing, Boone said. I ran the plate immediately after Amanda showed me the video. Reported it up the chain. Sheriff Knox told me he'd handle it personally. That was yesterday afternoon. As far as I can tell, no one has questioned either of the Dales yet. The Dales are major donors to the county, Eve observed. Graham Dale funds half the town's charitable initiatives, and Sheriff Knox's re-election campaigns, Boone added. I've worked here 6 years, and I've never seen the sheriff intervene personally on a hit and run. She glanced toward Mara, who was absorbed in her coloring. You see why your daughter might have been in danger if she witnessed this? And why might she have specified which officers to trust? She was going to come forward with the video evidence, and someone knew she had it, Boone confirmed. The timing fits. The hit and run was 3 nights ago. That same night, Tara brings Mara to the cabin and disappears. Have you searched her apartment yet? Team's there now. I'll take you over when they're done. Boone hesitated. There's one more thing. The text Tara sent to Amanda with the video just said, if something happens to me, show this to Deputy Boone, no one else. We need to go back to the cabin, Eve said suddenly. Mara was hidden there for a reason. There might be more evidence Tara left behind. It makes sense. If she didn't trust the department as a whole, she wouldn't bring evidence to the station. I can take you there now officially. We should document anything we find properly. An hour later, Eve, Mara, and Deputy Boone stood inside the cabin. In daylight, Eve could see details she'd missed during the storm. A kerosene lamp on a small table, a few protein bar wrappers neatly folded in a corner, a jug of water, signs that Tara had prepared this place as a temporary shelter. Mara, did your mama show you anything else in this cabin? Eve asked. Any other special hiding places? Mara shook her head, holding tight to Eve's hand, just under the floor. She said, stay there until the dog came. Ranger, who had accompanied them, moved purposefully through the cabin, not to the pantry where Mara had hidden, but to the stone hearth on the opposite wall. He sat, staring intently at one particular stone. What is it, boy? Eve approached. The stones were blackened from decades of fires, but one in particular seemed darker than the others. Deputy, Eve called, can you help me check this stone? Together, they managed to pry the stone free. Behind it was a small cavity containing a food sealer bag with a cell phone and a yellow sticky note that read, for Mom, not the sheriff. Boone photographed everything in place before Eve removed the items. The phone was powered off. We should examine this somewhere safe, Boone advised. My house, Eve suggested. I have an old laptop that isn't connected to Wi-Fi. We can check the phone there without it sending or receiving signals. As they prepared to leave, Eve noticed Mara staring at something on the pantry doorframe. Following her gaze, Eve saw faint marks carved into the wood. Moving closer, she realized they were height measurements, labeled with ages: Tara, 6, Tara, 7, Tara, 8. Eve's fingers traced the marks, memories flooding back. This cabin, this had been their special place when Tara was small. Eve and Michael would bring her here on weekends. Pretending they were explorers, they'd mark her height every summer on the doorframe. How could she have forgotten? Your mama used to come here when she was your age, Eve told Mara softly. This was our special hide-and-seek spot. Mara looked up. Mama was little like me? Yes, just like you. Eve felt tears threatening. That's why she knew this would be a safe place for you. Back at Eve's house, they carefully examined the phone using Eve's old laptop, which remained disconnected from any networks. The phone contained a single video file, the same hit-and-run footage Amanda had received, but from a slightly different angle and continuing longer after the impact. He was driving her car, Boone observed. This version clearly showed the driver's face when the SUV briefly stopped, not Allison Dale, but her husband, Graham. And that's not all. She pointed to a brief segment of footage showing the SUV reversing toward where the victim had fallen. He went back, not to help, but to make sure, Eve finished. The video showed Graham Dale exiting the vehicle briefly, looking down at something off-camera, then quickly returning to the SUV and driving away. But the most damning evidence came next, a short clip apparently filmed on a different night, showing Sheriff Knox and Graham Dale outside the county administration building, well after midnight, loading a box into Dale's trunk. The time-stamp indicated it was the night after the hit-and-run. Evidence, Boone whispered. They're removing evidence. Eve looked at the deputy. This puts you in danger too, now that you've seen this. I signed up to uphold the law, Mrs. Mercer. All of it, not just the parts that are convenient for wealthy donors. She stared at the frozen image of her boss conspiring with Dale. But you're right, we need to be careful. The sheriff has a lot of loyal deputies who won't question his orders. What do we do now? First, I will make a secure copy of this evidence, Boone said decisively. Then I will contact the state police. This is beyond county jurisdiction now. It's tampering with evidence, conspiracy, possibly murder if they deliberately targeted Chen. And Tara? We keep looking. Now that we know what she witnessed, we can narrow our search. She glanced at Mara, who had fallen asleep on the couch with Ranger keeping watch. For her sake, we need to find answers. That evening, after Boone had left with a secure copy of the evidence, Eve received another anonymous call. Delete it. The family will get hurt. The threat was clear, but Eve had no intention of backing down. She immediately reported the call to Boone, who promised to expedite the state police involvement. The next morning, Eve discovered something disturbing online. Anonymous posts on the community Facebook page accusing her of kidnapping a neighbor's child for attention. There were even photos of her house with captions suggesting she was mentally unstable since her husband's death. They're trying to discredit me, she realized, showing the post to Boone when she arrived to check on them. Classic intimidation tactic, Boone agreed. But it won't work. We have documentation of your relationship to Mara, and the caseworker's report was favorable. That afternoon, Eve received an unexpected visitor. Luann Porter, a fellow member of Eve's church and the town librarian, arrived looking nervous and agitated. I need to tell you something, Luann said, about Tara. You've seen my daughter? About 2 weeks ago, she came to the library asking if I knew any good lawyers who weren't connected to the Dale family. Said she needed someone clean who couldn't be bought. Did she say why? Not specifically. Just that she'd filmed a hit and a cover-up and needed legal protection before going public. Luann glanced anxiously toward the window. Did she say who was calling her? She also mentioned that someone from the county office kept calling her, asking to talk in person. She was scared, Eve. Said she didn't trust them. No names, just that it was someone high up. Luann swallowed hard. I recommended Attorney Pearson in Capital City. He has no ties to local politics. Tara thanked me and said she'd contact him the next day. That was the last time I saw her. Did you tell anyone about this conversation? Not a soul. But Eve, the timing. I saw the news about that environmental consultant who died in a hit-and-run. And now Tara's missing. Thank you for telling me, Luann, Eve said. It helps confirm what we already suspected. But please be careful. The The people involved are dangerous. After Luan left, Eve called Boone to relay the new information. The deputy sounded grimmer than ever. "The state investigators will be here tomorrow morning," she reported. "That's concerning. He knows I've seen the video. This is his way of trying to contain the situation." She paused. "I'm off duty tomorrow. I'll come by your place at 7 a.m. We should go back to the cabin one more time before the state team arrives. I have a feeling we might have missed something. And I've been officially removed from the hit-and-run case by Sheriff Knox. Said it was a conflict of interest because I'm too close to the victim's family." The next morning, Eve, Mara, and Deputy Boone in civilian clothes returned to the cabin. This time, it was Mara who noticed something. "Grandma, look," she said, pointing to the wall with the height marks. "Ranger is doing his looking thing again." Sure enough, the dog was focused intently on the wall, pawing once at a specific board before sitting expectantly. Eve ran her fingers along the board, feeling for irregularities. Near the bottom, she found a loose strip that lifted to reveal a small cavity behind. Taped to the back of the strip was a key, its red paint chipped with the words "Depot Locker 22B" written on a faded tag. "The bus depot," Boone said. "Smart place to hide something. Public, accessible, 24/7, anonymous." They drove directly to the Alder Creek Bus Depot, a small building serving the 3 daily buses that connected their town to the larger cities in the region. Locker 22B was in the back corner, partially obscured by a vending machine. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, they found a sealed envelope labeled "For Mom," second phone, and a thumb drive. Eve opened the envelope with trembling hands, unfolding a single sheet of paper. "Mom, I messed up a lot, but not this. I saw their car hit a man. I tried to flag them. They sped. If I don't make it, keep Mara. Keep the truth." The second phone contained a brief video of Tara herself, looking exhausted, her voice barely steady. "If anything happens, it's the bend at Millstone." Eve stared at the evidence. They followed her that night, after she dropped off Mara, and now we know why she was so careful to hide everything in separate locations, Boone added. She was expecting them to come after her. As they left the depot, Eve noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its engine running. The windows were tinted, but she could make out a male driver watching them. "That's a serious allegation, Mrs. Mercer." "Yes, it is, and I have video evidence to support it. I suggest you wait for the state investigators before making any decisions about Mara's placement." "I'll postpone my visit until I've spoken with the state authorities," Miss Jenkins finally conceded. "But Mrs. Mercer, be careful. Making accusations against the sheriff is politically unwise." After hanging up, Eve turned to Boone. "They're moving quickly to discredit us and take Mara." "Which means they're scared," Boone pointed out. A sharp knock at the door interrupted her. Both women froze. Ranger moved immediately to Mara's side, his posture alert but not aggressive. "Mrs. Mercer?" called a male voice. "Sheriff's Department. Please open the door." Boone motioned Eve to stay back, then moved to peek through the window. "It's Deputy Wilson," she whispered. "The sheriff's cousin. The one who followed Tara." "What do we do?" "Don't open the door," Boone instructed. "He doesn't have a warrant. I'll handle this." She straightened her civilian clothes and moved to the door, opening it just enough to be seen, but blocking entry. "Deputy Wilson," she greeted coolly. "What brings you here?" "Deputy Boone. I was told you were on administrative leave." "I am. I'm visiting a friend during my personal time. The sheriff wants to speak with Mrs. Mercer regarding her claims about her daughter." "Any questions can wait for the state police," Boone replied firmly. "They're on their way now to investigate evidence of obstruction and tampering related to the Chen hit and run. I need to speak with Mrs. Mercer now." "That's not happening, Deputy," Boone stated. "You don't have a warrant, and Mrs. Mercer declines to speak with you. The sheriff won't be pleased." The sheriff has bigger problems than my displeasure, Boone replied evenly, like explaining why he was moving evidence with Graham Dale the night after Chen was killed. You're making a mistake, Boone. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. I'm on the side of the law, she answered. Now, unless you have a warrant, I suggest you leave before the state police arrive and have questions about why you're here intimidating witnesses. After Wilson departed, Boone locked the door and pulled Eve away from the windows. They're getting desperate. We need to move the evidence somewhere safer until the state team arrives. Eve nodded. Where? My brother's hunting cabin. It's off the grid, about 20 minutes from here. They won't think to look there. Will we be safe there? Safer than here. Wilson knows where you live, and he clearly has orders concerning you and Mara. Mara, sweetheart, we need to go on a little trip, just for a few hours. Because of the bad people? Mara asked quietly. Yes, but Deputy Boone is going to help keep us safe, just like your mama said she would. Mara nodded. Mama said, sometimes you have to hide to stay safe, like hide and seek. But for real. The simple wisdom in the child's words broke Eve's heart. That's right, and you're very good at hide and seek, aren't you? The best. Mama said so. Then, let's get ready. We'll take Ranger too, of course. As they prepared to leave, Eve noticed headlights pulling into her driveway. Not a police cruiser, but a civilian vehicle. Through the window, she recognized her church friend Luan hurrying toward the house. Eve, Luan called urgently when Eve opened the door. You need to see this. She thrust her phone forward, showing a local news website headline, Daughter of local woman sought in connection with drug operation, child in potential danger. They're moving faster than we anticipated, Boone observed, trying to control the narrative before the state investigation becomes public. There's more, Luan said breathlessly. The sheriff was at the church this afternoon, talking to Pastor Miles about your mental state since your husband died, asking if the church had noticed any concerning behavior. Eve, they're trying to paint you as unstable. They want Mara, or rather, they want to make sure she's not with someone who knows the truth about what happened to Tara. You think they've hurt Tara? I think they followed her the night she disappeared after hiding Mara at the cabin, Eve said, and I think they're willing to do whatever it takes to cover up their involvement in Chen's death. Eve, this is serious, Luan whispered. These are powerful people, which is exactly why they can't be allowed to succeed, Eve replied. Luan, when the state police arrive, tell them we've gone to secure evidence. They can contact Deputy Boone in her cell. Be careful, Eve. Within minutes, Eve, Mara, Ranger, and Deputy Boone were in Boone's personal vehicle, heading toward the hunting cabin. As they drove, Boone kept checking the rearview mirror. Are we being followed? Eve asked quietly. Not yet, Boone replied. But we should assume they'll figure out where we've gone eventually. What about the state police? Will they be able to find us? I've texted my contact our location. They'll come to us once they arrive in town. Boone's grip on the steering wheel tightened. The good news is, with this many people involved in the cover-up, someone will eventually talk to save themselves. Conspiracy charges are serious business. They drove in silence for several minutes, taking a series of increasingly rural roads, until they turned onto a barely visible dirt track winding into dense forest. The cabin, when they reached it, was little more than a sturdy one-room structure with basic amenities, a far cry from Boone's brother's main residence, Eve suspected. It's not much, Boone acknowledged, but it's defensible and off the beaten path. While Boone secured the doors and windows, Eve settled Mara on a worn but clean sofa, covering her with a blanket. Ranger took up his now familiar position beside her, alert but calm. You've been amazing through all this, Eve told the girl softly. Your mama would be so proud of you. Mara's eyes, heavy with sleep, focused briefly on Eve's face. Are you proud too? Yes, she said, with conviction. Mara nodded, satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. Eve watched her for a moment, marveling at this resilient child who had entered her life so unexpectedly. Whatever happened next, she knew with absolute certainty that she would protect this girl with everything she had. "We need a plan for when the state police arrive," Boone said. "They'll want statements from both of us, and they'll need to properly document all the evidence." Eve nodded. "And we need to locate Tara. Whether," she swallowed hard, "whether she's alive or not, the video shows Wilson following her that night. Once he's in custody, he'll likely cooperate to reduce his own charges. Unless they all maintain the same story," Eve pointed out. "That Tara was involved in something illegal, that her disappearance is unrelated to the hit and run." "Evidence doesn't lie," Boone countered. Eve hoped the deputy was right. The alternative, that those responsible for whatever had happened to Tara might escape justice, was unthinkable. Boone's phone buzzed with a text. "The state team is on its way to us. ETA 30 minutes. What happens after they take our statements?" "They'll secure the evidence, then execute search warrants, probably at the sheriff's office, the Dale residence, and anywhere else implicated by the footage." Boone paused. "They'll also likely want to do a thorough search for Tara, starting with tracking Wilson's movements the night she disappeared." Eve nodded. Part of her still clung to hope that Tara might be alive. Held somewhere, perhaps, but alive. Another part, the rational medic who had seen too much death, whispered that the threatening calls and elaborate cover-ups suggested a grimmer reality. "What's that?" Eve asked suddenly. Hearing a vehicle approaching, Boone moved to the window. "State police," she confirmed, recognizing the unmarked but official vehicle. "Stay here with Mara. I'll meet them outside." Eve watched anxiously as Boone stepped onto the porch to greet two plainclothes officers. After a brief conversation, all three entered the cabin. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm Detective Sandoval with the state police," the older officer introduced himself. "This is my partner, Detective Ward. We understand you have evidence regarding the hit-and-run death of Marcus Chen and potentially related to your daughter's disappearance." "Yes," Eve confirmed. "My daughter Tara witnessed Graham Dale strike Chen with his wife's SUV. She recorded it and hid copies of the evidence before she disappeared 3 nights ago. And you believe her disappearance is connected to what she witnessed?" "We have footage showing a county deputy following her the night she vanished," Boone interjected. Detective Sandoval's expression remained professionally neutral. "Show us everything you have." For the next hour, Eve and Boone walked the detectives through all the evidence they had gathered. The videos, Tara's notes, the timeline of events. They explained the threatening calls, the online smear campaign, and the sheriff's attempts to discredit them and gain custody of Mara. "This is compelling," Detective Ward acknowledged. "Enough for multiple warrants, certainly. We'll need to take official statements from both of you," Sandoval added, "and secure the evidence properly. But first, I want to send a team to search along Millstone Bend. If your daughter confronted Dale after witnessing the hit-and-run, that area becomes a high-priority search location." Eve felt her heart constrict. "I want to be there." "That's not standard procedure in an active investigation," Ward began. "I was an army medic for 20 years, Eve interrupted. "I've recovered bodies in war zones. If my daughter is out there, I need to be the one to find her." The detectives exchanged glances before Sandoval nodded reluctantly. "We'll arrange for you to join the search team, but the child stays here with protection." "I'll stay with Mara," Boone volunteered. As preparations were made for the search, Eve found herself standing alone on the cabin's small porch, staring up at the stars appearing in the early evening sky. The same stars that had shone down on Tara wherever she was now. Eve allowed herself one moment of overwhelming grief for the years lost to estrangement, for the possibility that she might never see her daughter alive again, before squaring her shoulders. "I'll find you," she whispered to the night air. "One way or another, I'll bring you home." The search began at dawn. State police had secured Millstone Bend overnight, establishing a perimeter to preserve any potential evidence. Eve rode with Detective Sandoval, her eyes scanning the roadside with the practiced attention of someone who had searched for the wounded in far more chaotic circumstances. Your daughter's car was found abandoned at her apartment complex, Sandoval informed. No signs of struggle inside the vehicle, but we're processing it for evidence. Eve nodded. And the warrants? Being executed simultaneously this morning. Teams at the Dale residence, Sheriff Knox's home, and Deputy Wilson's residence. Another team at the county building securing relevant records in the sheriff's office. They arrived at Millstone Bend as the early morning mist was beginning to lift. The curve in the road where Chen had been struck was marked with small flags, indicating the likely path of the vehicle based on the video evidence. Beyond the road, a steep embankment led down to what had once been a creek, but was now mostly dry except for a few stagnant pools. The impact would have occurred approximately here, Sandoval indicated. Based on the video, the victim was thrown down the embankment. Eve studied the terrain with clinical detachment, falling back on her medical training. If Tara confronted Dale here after witnessing the hit and run, where would she have approached from? The video shows she was filming from that cluster of trees. He pointed to a small stand of pines about 30 yards from the impact site. She might have emerged from there. The search team spread out, methodically examining the roadside, the embankment, and the dry creek bed below. Eve worked alongside them, her movements precise and thorough. She found herself falling into the rhythm she had developed in Afghanistan, systematic, attentive to details others might miss, focused on the task rather than its potential outcome. It was Ranger who made the discovery. Eve had brought him along over the detective's initial objections, arguing that his senses had already proven valuable in finding both Mara and the hidden evidence. The dog had been working alongside her for about an hour when he suddenly froze, then moved purposefully toward a section of the creek bed where brush had accumulated against a fallen log. Eve followed, watching as Ranger began pawing at something partially visible beneath the debris. Her heart pounding, she called for Detective Sandoval. What they uncovered confirmed Eve's worst fears, a scrap of fabric that she recognized as part of a scarf Tara had worn in the photo on Mara's lunchbox. Nearby, partially buried under rocks, they found a side mirror with the same charity decal visible in the hit-and-run video. The discovery accelerated the search. Teams focused on the area downstream from where the scarf had been found. Within an hour, they located Tara's car, rolled onto its side in a hidden section of the creek bed, deliberately covered with brush and debris. Eve stood silently as the forensic team processed the scene. The car's windows were shattered, the front end damaged in a way inconsistent with simply rolling down the embankment. Inside, they found blood on the driver's seat and dashboard. This was staged, Sandoval concluded grimly, made to look like she lost control and went off the road. Eve nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. She knew what was coming next, and had known it since finding the scarf. But knowledge didn't ease the pain when, a quarter-mile further downstream, search dogs alerted to an area where the ground had been disturbed. The recovery team worked carefully, respectfully, as they uncovered Tara's body. Eve insisted on being present, drawing on every ounce of professional detachment she had cultivated as a medic. She recognized her daughter despite the damage time and elements had wrought, recognized the shape of her hands, so like Eve's own, the birthmark on her collarbone, the silver chain around her neck that had been a gift from Michael on Tara's 16th birthday. The coroner's preliminary assessment was blunt force trauma consistent with a car impact, followed by post-mortem relocation. Tara had been struck by a vehicle, then her body had been moved and hidden. Eve stood apart from the recovery team, her grief a physical weight pressing down on her. Ranger leaned against her legs, a solid, warm presence anchoring her to the moment. Detective Sandoval approached cautiously. "Mrs. Mercer, I'm so sorry. We'll need official identification, but not here. At the morgue. When you're ready." Eve nodded. "She came back," she said quietly. "After all those years away, she came back to Alder Creek." "Why?" We found something in her apartment that might explain it, Sandoval said. A job offer from the county environmental office. She was qualified. Her resume showed a degree in environmental law that completed after leaving town. The position would have put her directly in contact with the watershed project Chen was consulting on. The same project Dale's development depends on, Eve realized. She wasn't just passing through, she came back, purposefully, to work on that project. It appears so, and given what she witnessed, it's likely she recognized the significance immediately. Chen was reportedly preparing to recommend against the development due to watershed impacts. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of calculated violence rather than an unfortunate accident. Graham Dale had deliberately struck Chen to prevent his negative report, then killed Tara when she witnessed it. The sheriff had helped cover up both crimes to protect his wealthy patron. I need to go back to Mara, Eve said. She's lost her mother. She needs to know she hasn't lost me too. Sandoval nodded, understanding. A patrol car will take you back to the cabin. We'll continue processing the scene and coordinate with the teams executing the warrants. With this discovery, we'll be adding murder charges. Eve sat silently in the back of the patrol car, Ranger beside her, trying to find words to explain to a 6-year-old that her mother would never return. The ride back to the cabin passed in a blur. How could she convey such devastating finality without crushing the child's spirit? By the time they reached the cabin, Eve had composed herself as much as possible. She needed to be strong for Mara now, to provide the stability and security that Tara had entrusted her to give. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. Where's Mara? Eve asked. Inside. Deputy Boone met her at the door, one look at Eve's face telling her everything she needed to know. Eve nodded, taking a deep breath before entering. Mara looked up from her coloring book, her face brightening at the sight of Eve and Ranger. Grandma, did you find Mama? She sat beside Mara, gently taking the small hands in hers. Mara, I need to tell you something very sad. The police found your mama today. She was hurt very badly by the same bad people who hurt the man on the road. Mara's eyes widened. Is she in the hospital? No, sweetheart. Your mama's injuries were too severe. She died. Do you understand what that means? Mara's lower lip quivered, like Grandpa in heaven. Mama showed me his picture and said he had to go to heaven because his body got too sick. Yes, like that, Eve confirmed. Your mama's body was too hurt to keep working, but she loved you very, very much. She made sure you would be safe with me before anything happened to her. Tears welled in Mara's eyes and spilled over. But I want Mama to come back. I know, Eve whispered. I want that too. And it's okay to be sad and to cry. I'm sad too. As Mara sobbed against her shoulder, Eve held her granddaughter tightly, their shared grief binding them together. Ranger pressed close against both of them, offering his silent comfort. Graham Dale, Sheriff Knox, and Deputy Wilson were in custody. In that moment, Eve made a silent vow to her daughter. Mara would be loved, protected, and raised to know how brave her mother had been. Allison Dale was cooperating with investigators. Deputy Boone quietly stepped outside to give them privacy, returning some time later with an update from Detective Sandoval. The warrants had been executed successfully. The evidence from Tara's hidden phones and the physical evidence from the crime scenes had provided overwhelming proof of conspiracy and murder. The DA is confident they'll secure indictments on all counts, Boone reported. Dale's development project has been suspended pending a full investigation into permit irregularities and possible bribes to county officials. What happens now? Eve asked. You'll need to give formal statements, and there will be a grand jury. But with the evidence we have, it's unlikely any of them will avoid prosecution. Boone hesitated. There's something else. The sheriff's computer contained drafts of emergency removal orders for Mara. He was planning to have her placed in county custody today, citing your mental instability and Tara's alleged criminal connections. That's not going to happen. No, it's not, Boone agreed firmly. Detective Sandoval has already spoken with Miss Jenkins at CPS. With the sheriff's conspiracy exposed, there's no question about your fitness as guardian. In fact, given the circumstances, they're expediting your kinship custody application. 3 days later, the grand jury returned indictments. Graham Dale for the murders of Marcus Chen and Tara Mercer, Sheriff Knox and Deputy Wilson for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact. A county planning official for destroying evidence and accepting bribes. Allison Dale, who had turned state's witness, confirmed that she had loaned her SUV to her husband that night, and that he had returned with a damaged mirror, claiming a deer strike. When she questioned him after seeing news of the hit and run, he had assured her it was taken care of. The community of Alder Creek reeled from the revelations. The Dale family had been pillars of local society, generous donors to everything from the Little League to the library expansion. The sheriff had been considered a dedicated public servant. Their fall exposed fault lines in the town's power structure that had been invisible to most residents. For Eve, however, the indictments brought only hollow satisfaction. They wouldn't bring Tara back. They wouldn't give Mara her mother. Justice felt necessary, but insufficient in the face of such profound loss. A week after Tara's body was found, Eve attended a guardianship hearing with Mara. Despite the clear documentation of their relationship and Tara's explicit wishes, CPS procedures still required formal placement proceedings. Eve sat rigid in the courtroom as Miss Jenkins recommended neutral foster placement, pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. Your Honor, Eve's attorney countered, Mrs. Mercer has established kinship. The child's mother explicitly designated her as guardian in case of emergency. There is video evidence of this intention, written documentation, and community attestations to Mrs. Mercer's character and capability. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, studied the documents before her. Miss Jenkins, what specific concerns do you have about placement with Mrs. Mercer? Only that the situation is still developing, the social worker replied. There are ongoing criminal investigations, potential for media attention that could be harmful to the child, which would follow the child regardless of placement, the judge interrupted. The trauma of separation from her only remaining family member, however, would be unique to removing her from Mrs. Mercer's care. She shuffled through the paperwork once more before looking up decisively. The court finds that Mara Brooks is lawfully in the kinship custody of her grandmother, Evelyn Mercer, with a path to permanent adoption following the conclusion of criminal proceedings. Miss Jenkins schedules monthly well-being checks as standard, but this child is exactly where her mother intended her to be. Outside the courthouse, Eve knelt to Mara's level. Do you understand what happened there? Mara nodded solemnly. The lady judge said I get to stay with you and Ranger forever. That's right, Eve confirmed. Your mama wanted you to be with me, and now the court has made it official. Can we go home now? Yes, sweetheart. Let's go home. As autumn painted Alder Creek in shades of gold and rust, the community struggled to reconcile the peaceful beauty of their town with the violence that had been uncovered. The story had made national news briefly. Wealthy developer and corrupt sheriff conspiring to cover up murder before the relentless news cycle moved on to other tragedies. But in Alder Creek, the wounds remained fresh. For Eve and Mara, establishing a new normal was a daily process of small victories and tender moments. Mara had begun attending the local elementary school, where her quiet intelligence and remarkable resilience quickly endeared her to teachers. Eve had reduced her hospital volunteer hours to be home when Mara finished school each day, creating routines that provided security and consistency. Each night they shared memory time where Eve would tell Mara stories about Tara as a child, her favorite books, the games she loved to play, her determined spirit. They kept a photo of Tara on Mara's nightstand, making sure that even as the sharp edges of grief softened, Tara's presence remained a comfort rather than a source of pain. One crisp October afternoon, Eve received an unexpected visitor. A woman about her own age, with streaks of gray in her dark hair. Was that report recovered in the investigation? Yes, from his laptop at home. He'd emailed himself a draft the night he died. Aileen's hands tightened around her teacup. The State Environmental Agency is using it as the basis for permanent protection of that entire watershed area now. They're going to name the preserve after him. That would have meant a lot to him, I imagine. It does, but it doesn't bring him back. Eileen's eyes filled with fresh tears. No, Eve agreed. There's something else, Eileen said eventually. The two women sat in companionable silence for a moment, united by grief yet finding a measure of comfort in shared understanding. Something that came out in the depositions that I thought you should know. Graham Dale targeted Marcus deliberately that night. It wasn't a random hit and run. He saw Marcus walking back from collecting water samples and made the decision to strike him. And Tara? The same, according to Wilson's testimony. Once they realized someone had witnessed the hit and run, they reviewed traffic cameras near the scene and identified your daughter's car. Wilson followed her for days, reporting her movements to Dale and the sheriff. When she dropped Mara at the cabin that night, they decided she was preparing to go public with the evidence, and Wilson testified that he followed her back toward Millstone Bend, where Dale was waiting. They decided to silence her, Eve finished. They forced her car off the road at the same curve where Marcus died. Then Dale struck her with his vehicle when she got out to tune them. The clinical description of her daughter's final moments should have devastated Eve, but strangely, it brought a kind of peace. Tara had faced her killers directly, had stood her ground even knowing the danger. She had died as she had lived, facing injustice head-on, refusing to look away. "Thank you for telling me," Eve said. "Knowing the full truth, however painful, is better than wondering." "I thought so too," Eileen agreed. "There's one more thing. The state's attorney mentioned that all of Dale's assets will likely be seized as part of the case. That you accepted? His attorney has already approached me about a civil settlement for Marcus's death, apparently trying to preserve some assets for his wife before everything is frozen. Money won't bring Marcus back, and I won't be bought off. I'm going to wait for the criminal case to conclude, then file a wrongful death suit. A fitting legacy. What about you? Every penny will go to the environmental foundation we're establishing in Marcus's name. Have they approached you regarding Tara?" "Yes," Eve confirmed, "and I told them I don't rent out the truth," Eve said simply. An intermediary suggested a generous settlement if I would agree not to speak publicly about the case or file civil claims. That's what Tara would have wanted. Whatever compensation might eventually come from civil proceedings will go into a trust for Mara's education. "Mrs. Mercer, Eve, would you and Mara consider attending the dedication ceremony for the nature preserve next month? I think both Marcus and Tara would appreciate the connection between our families. We'd be honored," Eve replied sincerely. "And please, call me anytime. Sometimes, it helps to talk with someone who truly understands." After Eileen's departure, Eve found herself drawn to the abandoned cabin where Mara had hidden. She hadn't returned since the evidence had been collected, but today something pulled her there. With Mara at a school friend's birthday party and Ranger at her side, Eve walked the familiar path through the woods. The cabin looked smaller somehow, less ominous now that its secrets had been revealed. Each line represented a moment of joy, of family connection, from the time before grief and misunderstanding had driven them apart. Her hand stopped at the mark labeled Tara, 10. That had been the summer Michael had built her a treehouse, the summer before his first cancer diagnosis. They had been so happy then, so unaware of the challenges ahead. "I was wrong," Eve whispered. "I should have supported your sense of justice instead of fearing it. Should have protected your spirit instead of trying to make you more cautious." From tragedy had come an unexpected gift, the chance to love and protect a piece of Tara, to do better this time. As November arrived, bringing colder temperatures and the first threat of snow, the criminal cases progressed rapidly. Graham Dale faced the most serious charges: 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Sheriff Knox and Deputy Wilson had both accepted plea deals in exchange for testimony against Dale, receiving reduced sentences for multiple felonies including accessory to murder and evidence tampering. Others found themselves questioning what they had overlooked, what warning signs they might have dismissed over the years. On a cold, clear morning in mid-November, Eve and Mara stood with Eileen Chen at Millstone Bend for a small memorial ceremony. The location where both Marcus and Tara had died was being transformed. A simple stone marker had been placed along the roadside, and native plants were being restored to the embankment where development had once been planned. Ranger sat between them, head bowed as if understanding the solemnity of the moment. "My husband believed that every place has a story to tell," Eileen said softly. "This place has known tragedy, but now it will know healing." Eve nodded. From protection comes renewal. She looked down at her granddaughter. "Would you like to say something about your mama?" Mara stepped forward, placing a small painted stone beside the scarf. "I wanted you to know personally, before it hits the news. Graham Dale has accepted a plea deal, 2 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole." "No trial?" Eve asked, surprised. The evidence was overwhelming, and his attorney advised that a trial would likely result in the death penalty given the premeditated nature of both murders. Boone looked out over the watershed that would now be permanently protected. "The sad parts make the happy parts more precious, like finding treasure," Mara suggested. "Exactly like finding treasure," Eve agreed. Later, after Mara had fallen asleep, Eve sat on her back porch with a cup of tea, Ranger at her feet. The night was clear, stars scattered across the black canvas of sky like distant campfires. She found herself searching for the brightest star, imagining it might be Tara looking down, approving of how Eve was caring for Mara. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I found what was lost. I protected what matters. I brought her home." Ranger lifted his head at the sound of her voice, his warm eyes seemingly understanding her grief and her healing alike. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't watching the door or the tree line. His vigilance had eased as if he too sensed that the immediate danger had passed, that they had entered a new phase of guardianship. Eve reached down to stroke his graying muzzle. "Good boy," she murmured. "The best boy." As winter settled over Alder Creek, the criminal proceedings concluded with sentencing for all involved. Graham Dale received his consecutive life terms. Sheriff Knox was sentenced to 20 years. Deputy Wilson, having cooperated most extensively, received 12 years. The planning chair and 2 other county officials received sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years for their roles in the corruption. The Dale Development Company was dissolved, its assets seized and redistributed. Some went to victims' compensation funds, some to environmental restoration of sites damaged by previous developments, some to reform county governance procedures to prevent similar corruption in the future. For Eve and Mara, the conclusion of the legal proceedings brought a sense of closure, if not complete healing. The formal adoption process began, transforming their emergency kinship placement into a permanent family bond. "Will my name change?" Mara asked when Eve explained the adoption. "Only if you want it to," Eve assured her. "You can keep your mama's last name, or you can take mine, or you can have both together." Mara considered this seriously. "I want both, to keep part of Mama and have part of you too." Mara Brooks Mercer. Eve tried the combined name. "It has a nice sound to it, don't you think?" Mara nodded. "And Ranger too. He's family." "Absolutely," Eve agreed with a smile. "Ranger Brooks Mercer. The most important family member of all." As Christmas approached, Eve found herself facing the holiday with mixed emotions. This would be their first Christmas as a family, but also their first without Tara. How to balance celebration with remembrance, joy with grief. The answer came from Mara herself, who asked if they could make some of Tara's favorite Christmas cookies using a recipe Eve remembered from years ago. Together, they baked gingerbread stars, just as Eve and Tara had done when Tara was Mara's age. As they worked, Eve shared stories of Christmases past, building a bridge between generations through shared traditions. On Christmas Eve, they hung a special ornament on their tree, a silver star with Tara's name engraved on it. "So she's part of our Christmas too," Mara explained seriously. "That's perfect," Eve said. That night, after Mara had finally fallen asleep in anticipation of Christmas morning, Eve sat alone by the tree, its lights casting a warm glow through the quiet house. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from lonely widow to grandmother and guardian, from grief to purpose. The past months had taught her that justice, while necessary, was only part of healing. The rest came through love, through honoring those lost by living fully with those who remained. Tara had given her not only the precious gift of Mara, but also the chance to reclaim her own capacity for joy. As snow began to fall outside, dusting Alder Creek in pristine white, Eve made a silent promise to both her daughter and her granddaughter to protect the truth of their story, to nurture the legacy of courage Tara had left behind, and to help Mara grow into the strong, principled woman her mother had been. In the quiet of Christmas Eve, with her granddaughter sleeping upstairs and Ranger dozing by the fire, Eve finally allowed herself to feel something beyond grief and determination, hope. Hope for the future they would build together, hope for the healing that had already begun, hope for the town that was slowly reclaiming its integrity. Spring arrived in Alder Creek with an explosion of green, nature's annual reminder that renewal follows even the harshest winter. The watershed preserve at Millstone Bend was flourishing, protected now by both law and community vigilance. True to her word, Eve had taken Mara to plant wildflowers along the memorial path, black-eyed Susans and coneflowers, phlox and wild geranium, all native species that Marcus Chen had documented in his watershed study. Eileen Chen had joined them, bringing native grass seedlings and sharing stories about Marcus's passion for ecological restoration. The two women had developed a friendship founded on shared loss, but nurtured by mutual respect and understanding. Their families, once connected only by tragedy, were now linked by purpose and healing. For Mara, the school year was ending triumphantly. Despite the trauma she had experienced, she had thrived academically and begun to form friendships with classmates. Her teacher had noted her exceptional resilience and her particular aptitude for science, another inheritance from the mother she had lost, but continued to emulate. "Grandma, look," Mara called one May afternoon, rushing from the school bus with a paper clutched in her hand. "I got chosen for the summer science camp at the Nature Center." Eve examined the permission form with appropriate enthusiasm. The camp was a prestigious program usually reserved for older students, focusing on environmental education and conservation, exactly the kind of opportunity Tara would have wanted for her daughter. "This is wonderful, Mara. I'm so proud of you." "Miss Taylor said I can study the creek restoration as my project," Mara continued excitedly, "like Mr. Chen did. I want to see if the flowers we planted are helping the soil like Eileen said they would." Eve marveled at how naturally Mara had absorbed the values of both her mother and those who had been impacted by the events that had changed their lives. At just 7 years old, she was already channeling her grief into purpose, her questions into learning. "That sounds like a perfect project," Eve agreed. "Do you think Mama would be proud of me?" "Without a doubt," she answered firmly. It contained her wallet, the silver necklace she'd been wearing when she died, a set of keys, and a small notebook filled with observations about the watershed, professional notes interspersed with more personal entries. Eve had read it once before, her heart breaking anew at glimpses of the woman her daughter had become during their years apart. Today, she turned to the final pages, written just days before Tara's death. Took Em to the old cabin today, Tara had written. Strange to stand in that place again after so many years. All those height marks Mom kept evidence of love. I was too young to fully appreciate. If things go sideways with Dale and his cronies, at least Em will have Mom. She'll recognize what matters, what's worth protecting. She always did, even when I was too stubborn to see it. The commendation ceremony was held on a perfect June evening in the town square. Eve and Mara sat in the front row as Sheriff Boone spoke about integrity, courage, and the true meaning of public service. Today we establish the Tara Mercer Civilian Courage Award, Boone announced, to honor those who stand up for truth at great personal risk. Tara Mercer witnessed a crime committed by powerful people and chose to document it rather than look away. She took precautions to protect both her evidence and her child, knowing the danger she faced. Though she paid the ultimate price for her courage, her actions broke open a conspiracy that had corrupted our county for years and brought justice for multiple victims. Mara squeezed Eve's hand as they were called forward to accept the plaque. The girl stood tall beside her grandmother, her chin lifted in a gesture so reminiscent of Tara that several officers who had known her visibly reacted. "Thank you," Eve said simply, when handed the microphone. "Thank you," Eve said simply when handed the microphone. After the ceremony, several officers and community members approached to share memories of Tara, from her youth or more recent encounters. Each story added another piece to the mosaic of who she had been. Stubborn, principled, occasionally difficult, but always authentic. She came into the library every week to read to the preschool group, one woman told Mara. The children adored her voices for different characters. She helped me change a flat tire in the rain last winter, an elderly man recalled. Wouldn't accept payment, just asked me to help someone else when I had the chance. These glimpses of Tara's adult life were precious to Eve, filling in blanks from the years of estrangement. They were even more valuable to Mara, who collected each anecdote like a treasure, building a more complete picture of the mother she was too young to fully know. On the drive home, Mara was unusually quiet, processing all she had heard. Finally, she asked, "Grandma, can I be brave like Mama when I grow up?" "You already are brave, Mara, but being brave doesn't always mean doing dangerous things. Sometimes it just means standing up for what's right in small ways every day. Like telling the truth, even when it's hard." "Exactly. Or helping someone who's being treated unfairly. Or protecting something important, like the watershed." "I think I can do that." "I know you can," Eve assured her. Summer unfolded with a gentler rhythm than the previous year's chaos. Mara's days were filled with science camp, swimming lessons, and play dates with new friends. Eve divided her time between caring for Mara, volunteering at the hospital, and after careful consideration, accepting the position on the county ethics committee. The abandoned cabin, once a place of fear and hidden secrets, had been repurposed as a small field station for the watershed preserve. Eve had donated the structure and surrounding land to the conservation trust established in Marcus Chen's name, finding poetry in transforming a place of tragedy into one of education and renewal. In July, exactly 1 year after Ranger had first begun his vigilant staring at the tree line, Eve took Mara and the aging dog on a picnic to the cabin-turned-field station. Ranger moved slowly now, his muzzle almost entirely white, but his eyes remained bright and attentive. While Mara collected water samples from the now-flowing creek for her science project, Eve sat with Ranger on the porch, stroking his graying fur. "You knew, didn't you?" she murmured to him. Ranger leaned against her side, his steady presence a comfort as always. He had been her first companion after Michael's death, her ally in finding Mara, her fellow guardian through all that followed. As summer transitioned to fall, Eve found herself finally ready to make the house truly theirs. For months she had hesitated to make significant changes, as if altering the space might somehow erase the past. Now she understood that honoring memory didn't require preserving every physical detail. Together, she and Mara repainted the kitchen a sunny yellow, converted the rarely used formal dining room into a combination study and art space, and planted new perennials in the garden that would return year after year, a living symbol of continuity and renewal. In October, they held a small gathering to celebrate Mara's 8th birthday. Eileen Chen came, bringing a children's microscope as a gift. Several of Mara's school friends attended, along with their parents who had supported Eve through the difficult months of the trial and its aftermath. Deputy Boone, Sheriff Boone now, stopped by briefly with her niece, who had become one of Mara's closest friends. As Eve watched Mara blow out her candles, surrounded by this improvised extended family, she felt a sense of rightness that had been absent for too long. They had created something new from the fragments of what had been lost, not a replacement for what should have been, but a meaningful alternative nonetheless. That night, as she tucked Mara into bed, the girl asked, "Can we visit Mama's special place tomorrow?" "Of course. Would you like to bring flowers? And maybe we could bring one of my birthday cupcakes, so she can be part of the party too?" "That's a lovely idea," Eve agreed. The following afternoon found them at the memorial site, which had matured over the months into a peaceful garden surrounding the marker. The wildflowers they had planted in spring had flourished and gone to seed, promising new blooms next year. The small plaque now bore both Marcus Chen's and Tara's names, with the simple inscription, "They stood for truth." Mara carefully placed her offering, a cupcake with blue frosting and a small candle beside the marker. "I'm 8 now, Mama," she said, conversationally to the stone. "I'm in the science club at school, and I can swim all the way across the pool without stopping. Grandma Eve takes really good care of me, just like you said she would." Eve stood a few steps back, giving Mara space for this private communion, while remaining close enough to provide security. Ranger sat beside her. When Mara rejoined them, she seemed lighter somehow, as if the ritual had satisfied some need for connection. "Grandma, do you think the stars really are people watching over us, like you said?" Eve looked up at the afternoon sky, where the first star was just becoming visible despite the daylight. "I believe that the people we love remain part of us, even after they're gone," she said carefully. "I think Mama would like to be a star. She could see everything from up there." "She certainly would," Eve agreed. As they walked back to the car, Mara reached for Eve's hand. "Are you still sad sometimes, Grandma?" "Yes," Eve answered honestly, "but not all the time anymore. Mostly I'm grateful for what we have now." "Me too," Mara said. "Sad and happy, mixed together, but more happy now." "More happy now," Eve echoed. That evening, as autumn darkness fell early, Eve sat on the porch watching Ranger in the yard. For the first time in memory, he didn't position himself to watch the tree line or the door. Instead, he settled comfortably in the grass. His attention focused on Mara as she collected fallen leaves for a school project. When the chill finally drove them indoors, Mara spread her leaf collection on the kitchen table, carefully pressing each specimen between waxed paper. "My science teacher says leaves are like nature's record keepers," she explained seriously. "They tell the story of the tree's whole year." "That's a beautiful way to think of it," Eve acknowledged. Later, with Mara asleep and Ranger dozing at the foot of her bed, as had become his custom, Eve returned to the porch with a cup of tea. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark canvas of sky. She found herself searching for the brightest one, imagining it might be Tara looking down with approval. "We're doing okay," she whispered to the star. "She's strong, like you. Smart, like you. The best parts of you live on in her." A cool breeze stirred the trees, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. There was comfort in this quiet communion with the night, with memory, with the daughter whose absence had shaped this new life just as surely as her brief presence had transformed Mara's. At the kitchen table the next morning, Mara was drawing while Eve prepared breakfast. When Eve glanced over, she saw three figures on the paper: a woman, an older woman, and a dog, with the woman floating above the others like a bright star. "That's a beautiful drawing," Eve observed. "Is that us?" Mara nodded. "You, me, Ranger, and Mama watching over us." And in that moment, with morning sunlight streaming through windows, they had washed together, surrounded by furniture they had rearranged to suit their needs, in a home they had reclaimed from grief. Eve felt the full circle of their journey. From the night Ranger had stared insistently at the tree line to this quiet breakfast with Mara's drawings and plans for the day ahead, they had traveled from tragedy to a new kind of wholeness, not perfect, not unmarked by loss, but genuine and hard-won and, increasingly filled with joy. Eve looked toward the window, where the trees swayed gently in the autumn breeze. They were just trees now, not harbingers of hidden danger or keepers of terrible secrets. The cabin beyond them was a place of learning, not fear. The town around them was healing, becoming more transparent, more accountable.